Hi, I'm Wendy Turner, Executive Director of Michigan Public. You might have heard that public media is under threat. You're not wrong. But I come to tell you that your voice has power. Visit protectmypublicmedia.org, contact your lawmakers, and take a stand today.
From Michigan Public, this is It's Just Politics. I'm Zoe Clark. My co-host Rick Pluta is on assignment this week, but as Rick would tell you, one of my favorite things is trying to pull back the curtains on Lansing, right? The real state capital, how it works, how sometimes it doesn't work. And you don't always get those answers directly from lawmakers. But on today's show, two outgoing House representatives who won't be returning to Lansing next year, not because they weren't reelected, but because both of them decided not to run again, even though they could have. They are on the show today to look back at their time in Lansing and to let us know what it was really like.
I love that question.
We'll start with Democratic State Representative Felicia Brabec of Michigan's 33rd State House District, representing Washtenaw County. I started by asking her what the past two terms in office have been like.
I have felt so incredibly lucky. The work and the job I feel so passionate about. And so what it's been like is feeling this huge amount of responsibility to go and pass good bills that are important to folks here in our community, to be able to bring money back to our community for the vital things that we need, whether that's water infrastructure or school debt or a park, or a nonprofit, financial literacy, right? Like being able to support folks right here at home. There's nothing better.
So let's talk a little bit about change.
Sure.
And you get elected, it's 2020, you start in 21, you're in the minority for 2 years.
That's right.
And then there's this historic wave election in Michigan in 22, and your second term in office as a legislator, you're then in the majority.
Right.
What was that difference like? Did a switch just suddenly turn on? Like, I'm so curious what that's like.
It is almost like that because you do have to change on a dime. I mean, the dynamics completely, complete 180.
Yeah.
Instead of doing, this is just very practical, a lot of the bills that we would do in the minority are a lot of messaging bills. Like, here are our priorities, here are our values, we are putting our stake in the ground around those. The reality when you do legislation in Lansing is that it's incremental work, right? So that kind of reach value that you want to implement is probably not what's going to pass first time through. And so that's what I feel like, a big shift in the majority is we know that I can see it on the horizon. That's what we want to get to. But we need to do this first. And that's how we coalition build, right? Bring people to the table, residents, stakeholders, other partners in Lansing, other legislators, everyone around that table discussing whatever it is. And we take that first step. Then our governor signs it, and then we're one step closer. What is hard and challenging is that we can see that in the distance, what we want to have done, but know that we can't do that immediately. And sometimes that's really heartbreaking. And so that's, I think, the major difference when you're trying to do things.
We're talking right now during lame duck, this period of time post-election, before new lawmakers are sworn in. And so now the state house, of which you will not be a part of, is going to switch to Republican control. That means Democrats have this period of time right now. And we've been talking a lot on It's Just Politics about whether or not this has been a missed opportunity for Democrats to pass legislation before divided government comes back into Lansing. I'm curious about how you're thinking about lame duck and what's happening in Lansing right now.
So I agree. It's an opportunity. We have 8 days. And so, in my mind, I'm like, oh, there's so much to do. But there's, for me, I've very clearly laid out with my team. We have 9 bills that we're hoping to advance, and a couple other bill packages that I'm a part of, but not the lead on, but also working on those. And just trying to lay all the groundwork because this is going to be kind of lightning speed. So talking to committee chairs, talking to policy leads in leadership in both chambers, talking to our colleagues to make sure they're okay. Do you have any questions about the bill? Any problems? Do we need to change language? Doing all those things, I've been working on them. Because the other thing is always we work on bills for years. And I know that sometimes that folks be like, but this is a no-brainer and it makes so much sense. One of the bills that I'm working on right now and hoping to get across the finish line has been worked on for 30 years. 30 years. And I think we're there. I think
What's the bill?
So it's to allow master's level psychologists. Right now, those folks have to have supervision for their entire career, which does not make sense. They're the only master's level mental health care profession that has to do that. And so we're having it be similar to other, like masters in social work, masters in counseling, which is great. But when you hear that, you're like, oh, well, yeah, that took 30 years. Yeah, it took 30 years. So here we are. But laying all that groundwork, having those conversations, and I say this all the time, like the work that we get to do in our community, in Lansing, everywhere, it's all based on relationships. All of it. Being able to have those conversations to prime our bills makes it go smoother, right? So that's what we've been working on. So I'm hopeful, fingers crossed, all you can do is just do all that work, and hope for the best.
You've decided not to run again for the House, but you've announced that you'll be running for the Senate instead in 2026. And some of this has to do with term limits, right?
Yeah.
That you've decided not to run again so that you possibly, if you're elected in the Senate in 2026, can spend 2 terms in the upper chamber. I'm curious about your thoughts, having now been in Lansing, about term limits.
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, so I will be very careful with my language, Zoe. Like my plan is to put my name.
Yes.
You would like to. I would like to do that. I would love to be able to succeed our amazing Senator Jeff Irwin, and continue his legacy of work. And what I have found is that term limits, I think, have had an adverse effect and kind of the opposite effect that people thought when we first voted these in. And so what we have seen is that, there are lots of folks who help move policy forward and appropriations forward. Lawmakers, lobbyists, staff. And what we have found, or what I feel has happened with term limits, is that knowledge is power. And when you are, stepping into this role as a legislator, there's a lot to learn.
Yeah.
And when you only have a couple of years to get things done, you rely on other folks, right, who have the history, who have the knowledge, because we can't have it ourselves until we get in it. And so that part has been, I think, impacted by term limits. I am hopeful that at some point our term limits will change even more to allow folks to have some more longevity in both or either chamber to be able to do that good work. It just matters to know the history. I think history is such an important part of the work that we do. And often if you're not there, you don't know it. And sometimes it can be hard because all of us view history through our own lenses. And if we're getting it through another person's lens, then it might not be as accurate as we need it to be for the decisions that we have to make. And so it's going to be interesting to see how the change impacts the work that gets done, being now able to be in either chamber for up to 12 years. But I don't think it's long enough still. Like in my ideal world, if someone asked me, so I would, not that you asked, but.
No, I want you to just do this interview. Well, Representative. Yes, Representative.
I would love it if it was like 20 years. And that feels like a good amount of time to be able to get in there. I mean, the one thing that I try and do when I get to enter a new space, whether it was when I got to serve as a county commissioner or a state rep, was sit down, be quiet, listen, and learn. But when you have term limits, there's not a lot of time for that. Mm-hmm. So you're missing some vital pieces.
It's a hard sell, though, right? Term limits tend to be favorable. But what I'm hearing you say is there's this sort of institutional ruling class in Lansing that operates the Capitol, and the lawmakers are just coming in and out of that.
Yeah, to varying degrees, right? To varying degrees and effectiveness, I would say. And it's not that folks who are there, like that, they play an important role, like a very important role. And I partner with folks, with those subject matter folks and lobbyists on different bills, and it's really important. And I'd love, as a legislator, to be able to do that myself as well. And some things, like mental health, that one I have. That one I could do. That one, check. But that's also because I've been doing it now for this long. But there are so many things that we care about that we want to do in our community that we don't have that advantage. And it's really nice, for example, like in mental health, when I'm working with a department, say, and they have this idea about, a bill, and I can actually say, here's the history of this. And then they're like, oh, we thought it was this. And I was like, yeah, no. That's really helpful because that directly impacts our residents, right? And when we can bring that expertise and knowledge, that we're all better for it. We're all better for it. And it's not, I want to be very clear, it is not because in that example that I just used that like the department was trying to do something nefarious or malicious, not at all. We're all limited by the history and knowledge that we have. And so I would love for legislators to be able to have some more time to be able to develop that.
Representative, what surprised you the most about Lansing?
So many things. I think what has surprised me the most is how, I mean, we talked about this, we alluded to this. It is really hard to take an idea and make it a law. Like it takes a long time. Again, you bring so many people together. There are many iterations of it. And it's hard to, I was actually talking with another elected official yesterday about this, that some things that seem like they should be so easy take so long. And residents get frustrated, understandably, because they want something done. And I feel like that is really hard because I know for me, like I so desperately want to be able to deliver for our residents and do good work on their behalf. And when it feels like we fall, like at least I'll use I statements. When I when I feel like I fall short, that is really hard because I want to, like I started this by saying it's just been such an honor to do this. And so I take that responsibility very seriously. And so that is very hard for me.
State Representative Felicia Brabec, we're really appreciative of your time today.
I'm so happy to be here with you, Zoe. This is great.
And we're going to pause and take a quick break here. But before we do, I want to remind you that this is Michigan Public's end-of-year membership drive. It's a moment when we're hoping you'll take a moment and think about the conversations and the stories and the investigative reports that you get from Michigan Public and from NPR and the BBC and what they're worth to you. Every single dollar makes a difference. You can make your gift now at michiganpublic.org or by calling 888-258-9866.
This holiday season, dive into Michigan's culinary scene with The Dish, a podcast that celebrates the chefs.
Chop it right on your hand.
Yep.
And their stories.
We were poor, but we had what we needed.
One dish at a time.
My experimenting when it comes to recipes is like, how much sugar can I take out of this recipe without sacrificing the texture of it?
This is such like comfort food.
I'm your host, Mercedes Mejia. Subscribe now to The Dish, wherever you listen.
This is It's Just Politics. I'm Zoe Clark. My co-host Rick Pluta is off on assignment this week, so I took the opportunity to sit down with a couple of lawmakers who are leaving Lansing. Now, they're not term limited, they didn't have to go, but both are voluntarily leaving office. They decided not to run again. And it gave me a chance to sit down and ask them about the real Lansing, what's really happening at the state capitol. Representative Graham Filler represents Michigan's 93rd State House District. That's parts of Clinton, Gratiot, Ionia, and Saginaw counties. I started by asking Filler about the past 6 years in office.
Fantastic. Actually, I would say better than expected. I did come in and I had this vision of, resetting the Republican Party into this Ronald Reagan, old-style conservative image, and quickly realized that was not happening, not even close. And so I guess I pivoted into just being myself, policy-based, and there is an urge when you get in and you're very ambitious to want to, be the speaker, run things, be the king of the world. And I just sort of took my foot off that pedal a little bit and just focused my energy elsewhere and found out that was a pretty decent lane for me, doing bipartisan things, working on nuclear energy, saving background checks in the state of Michigan, things like that.
You're considered, I think it's fair to say, a pretty moderate Republican.
Yeah.
What does it mean to be a Republican in 2024?
It's really fascinating because I'm not sure what that answer is. We just had one of the strangest elections, and I know many, many Republicans who would say things like, I really don't like Donald Trump, but I don't like electric vehicle mandates, and I don't like everything being about social issues and climate change, so I'm going to vote for Donald Trump because things were better under President Trump, and he's not going to force the government down my throat. And I see that as sort of a common theme in Republican world. So what does it mean if we had to go super broad picture? Maybe a little less government, maybe trying to cut down inflation, maybe kitchen table issues being the bread and butter of what we do, which I don't think are bad things to talk about.
You've decided not to run again.
Yeah, it was time, and I loved it. The ability to represent individuals and actually help them is one of the best things. People have told me this will be the best job you've ever had. And I was like, we'll see. And it's remarkable when you get an individual call you. I remember a woman called from Ithaca and said, I'm sick from COVID. 6 months later, I'm still sick from COVID. And complications. Insurance says they're not going to pay for this. We're like, that sounds weird because COVID complications are covered. So we call. They say, oh, yeah, that's right. No, the analyst got it wrong here. Thanks for calling. They ended up sending her a check for like $11,000. That's the point of representative government. That's amazing that you can actually help people if you listen and you answer your phone. So I will miss that. But also there's the oddity of having like a bipartisan bill, seeing it die under just sort of unrelated partisan politics. And that does wear on you a little bit. And so we'll just go out and we'll try something else or move to a different sector, or we'll see.
What surprised you most about Lansing?
I don't think I was surprised that much. Just because I was an assistant attorney general, so I was very comfortable. I didn't come in, folks come in and say, I'm never going to talk to a lobbyist. I'm never going to talk to an interest group. And it's already like, well, good luck with being irrelevant because nobody's going to bring the issues that are important to your constituents to you. So I was one who I'm open. My door is open. I will speed date meetings with everybody who has a thought, and I'm going to disagree or agree and go from there. I've been a little surprised by the parties. I see it increasingly on the Dem side. They are younger. They are activists. They don't spend that much time in Lansing. They're focused on Twitter or very active protesting. These are very not your traditional 55-year-old union member from Muskegon. And on the Republican side, increasingly populist, increasingly blue collar. And so that's what I saw. So I don't know if that's a surprise, but that's really an observation.
You began your first term and then your second term as well. You were in the majority. Republicans were in charge of the state house. And now your final 2 years, you've been in the minority. What's that difference been like?
You know what I loved more than anything is I loved being a committee chair. It was the best thing, and it was a massive committee. My first term, Judiciary was one of these super committees where everything reported up. It was created like Congress. Like Congress runs committees sometimes. There was so much opportunity to build consensus, to run massive bills. I would say to leadership, here's this issue, like during COVID. Here's this issue. Businesses are worried they're going to get sued for an individual claims they got COVID on the premises. Let's do some protections. Run it through my committee. I remember I was in Mackinac Island, and it was like Wednesday, and I got a call from leadership, and they said, we have 2 yes votes on the committee, and you got to whip this out on Tuesday. I said, I'm going to get it done. I love that. I love being a chair, and I loved help setting an agenda. I was very different in the minority, where you see bills that you really philosophically disagree with, and your tack is different. So there was one bill dealing with second look, which is if you were in prison 10 years or longer, you would get a second look, a second hearing. And it was really written from a sort of to favor the individuals in prison. And I said, I'm not going to stand by that. So we held a press conference, and I never really take things personally, and I hope others don't. I know that's not always true, and I just live with that. But so then I could be a little bit of a bomb thrower to say this is not good legislation. This goes to war with victims of crime, is bad for the judiciary system, and it's not a partisan issue. It's just bad for public safety. So your tack changes. But I do hope that my personality was the same in the majority and the minority, where I will go to the other side of the aisle and I'll get down on a knee on the House floor and say, hey, you're working on this bill. Do you want to work together? Here's why I can't support it, or here's what I think you should do. I've got a great Taylor Swift story where Mike McFall and I are having a drink. I don't think he drinks. I was drinking at a Tigers game, and he said, it's hard to get tickets at these Taylor Swift concerts because these computers come in. And I was like, yeah, it's terrible. No, I know all these Swifties. I'm kind of one. And then I said, well, what do we do about it? And he said, Arizona just passed this Taylor Swift package of bills. I said, I'm in. And I called my LD and said, I need 2 bluebacks ASAP. We're going to turn this into law. And it's in the Senate. I think I have a meeting on it later this week where we're trying to move it through the Senate. So that's a really cool thing to be part of. And I hope my personality stayed the same.
What is something that you think Michiganders should know or understand about the Capitol?
2 things. a lot of good things happen, and it's really hard to cut through the muck to find those things. There's a great Isaac Robinson story. Do you remember Isaac Robinson? He's 6'7", he's 320 pounds. He's just this massive guy from Detroit. And, I'm not saying he was a socialist, but he would probably say that, he was very close to that. And he came to me when I was working on expungement, like a day before we were going to run the bills through the House. He said, I've got a better bill for you. Filler, I got a better bill for you. I rewrote it with the Attorney General's office. It deals with marijuana expungement, cannabis expungement. I said, "Are you serious?" "Okay, I'll take a look." And you don't know if someone's serious or not. And he's right. He wrote a better bill. And I went to leadership, and I said, "The guy's right, and I don't want to steal his bill. And he did the work, so can we give it to him?" They were like, "All right, if you say so." And he died about 7-8 months later during COVID, and his bill was signed into law. And that's a really powerful thing to know that people actually do work together and they do listen to each other sometimes. I guess another thing about Lansing that people should know is that I think that the oversight is not great on state budgets. And I'm not sure. It's such a big budget and the numbers are so big. And with term limits, I know we're doing a little experiment about longer term limits now, but with term limits, people have not known if programs are working or not. There's new chairs every 2 years. How do you really get to know the Department of Corrections billion-dollar budget, right? I really hope we return maybe to the old days of digging into these budgets a little bit more.
Is there a hunger, do you think, in Lansing for that to actually happen?
No, I don't. Because it's just so easy to say that sounds like a good program, here's $1 million. So I'd like to see a little bit more insight, oversight, deep diving. Don't know if it's possible.
Will we see you back in Lansing?
I guess we'll see. I don't have some big dream. I was an assistant attorney general. I am comfortable in that office, and I had thoughts about running for attorney general. I don't know what that looks like going forward, but I wouldn't mind working on policy and in the law. I'm a lawyer, of course, going forward.
That is outgoing Representative Graham Filler. Thanks so much for your time.
Yes, thank you.
And that is It's Just Politics for today during Michigan Public's end-of-year fund drive, a moment when we turn to you and ask you to do your part to keep local, statewide, national, and international news and conversations on your airwaves. You can do your part, have an impact on independent journalism right now at michiganpublic.org or by calling 888-258-9866.